Right, hi. So this is lunchtime, and so I'm going to start my presentation like I start all of them and make everybody have a nice big stretch like Sarah, our Arctic fox here. So I can see Kenji on camera. I'm going to trust everyone else who I can't see on camera that you're having a big stretch, a shake of the head, stick your tongue out, and let's get going. So hi, yeah, I'm Lizzie. I'm the Learning Technology Officer for the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland. So I am based at Edinburgh Zoo and the Highland Wildlife Park. And Kenji's very kindly asked me along today to talk about ZOOdle, which is our zoo digital learning environment, and specifically what we do for schools. Um, So before I do that, I'll give you a little bit of an intro to our department, just as Amy did as well. We're really on theme today. Our presentations gel really nicely. It's like we prepared it. So, excuse me. So my department is Discovery and Learning, and we work with all of the sort of learning involved in Edinburgh Zoo and the Highland Wildlife Park. So that's our on-site visitors, that's schools, which we're specifically interested in today. It involves people off-site, community groups, all kinds of volunteers, just the whole range. I've got a lovely little video here of our team. I don't know if you can hear that. No, perfect. Because it's got captions, so you don't need it. But here's just a little intro of our team, just saying how much they love where we work and what we do. And then I'll just let them play so you can see some penguins. And then also we have ZOOdle, which is what I'm here to talk about today. So yeah, as I mentioned, that's our zoo digital learning environment. The link is at the bottom, but I think the captions might be covering it. If Kenji wouldn't mind popping in the chat, it's learning.rzss.org.uk. And so we will have a look. And I'll just, because my colleagues were talking in my ear then, and I was distracting myself. So yes, so ZOOdle was came from a Moodle installation that we had. So it is getting on for 9 years old now at this point. And so we started it specifically for schools. We got Moodle for schools so that we could complement the lessons that we offered. So classes will come to Edinburgh Zoo or the Highland Wildlife Park on a school trip, and they'll have 45 minutes or an hour with some of our wonderful staff. And that was all of the sort of contact we had with them, and we wanted to extend that learning. So we set up a Moodle installation to offer materials for pre and post visit. So teachers could find out a little bit more about what they were going to learn about and sort of start that conversation in class. They'd come to the zoo, they'd see our animals, they'd hang out with our fantastic educators, and then they could go back to the classroom and they could carry on that learning. And ZOOdle does still offer that. But we've also extended what we offer. So as well as complementing those on-site programs, we also have a whole package of different resources for schools for self-led visits to ZOOdle, to the zoo, sorry, self-led visits to the zoo or the Highland Wildlife Park. So the teachers can download a pack of resources before they come. They can get a whole load of facts, and they can basically plan their own tour around the zoo without having contact from any of our staff, which works better for some groups. We also have our outreach. So we do outreach for schools, and this is actually the most popular area of ZOOdle now. It's the most visited, which I'll show you in a minute. We also offer event support. So you're probably aware that the zoo and the Highland Wildlife Park, we have some really exciting events throughout the year. I think a highlight of this year was our Brick Live Safari, which had 20 huge life-size or sometimes bigger Lego models around the site. And we created some ZOOdle resources to help teachers support their visits. So when they were coming in to see Brick Live Safari, they could have a whole load of ZOOdle resources to use with their classes around that as well. And then also to mention that we do have a huge family section on ZOOdle, which has been designed for families to learn together. So there are resources there that you can throw an iPad at your child and they can do a game if you need 20 minutes apiece. But the idea is that the parents, the carers, the adults will do all of these resources with the kids to help connect everybody with nature as per our mission. So these are our school pages over the last 4 years. So as Kenji mentioned, I spoke probably late 2020, early 21, when we'd kind of revamped and we'd got the name ZOOdle. It took us nearly 5 years to think of ZOOdle off Moodle. So when we had that revamp, I did the presentation, and so I'm kind of going with the stats from then. So when it became ZOOdle, so we actually have, I've put 39 plus courses. We actually have 40 pages for schools, but I have skipped one of them because it's huge and it skews the figures massively. So we have 39 pages for schools. Which has seen over those 4 years 45,000 visitors from all around the world, and 570,000 page views. Just to give you an idea of kind of how popular, I guess, how much demand there can be for schools content on Moodle in general. So to kind of put this into context, this is 26% of all traffic to our Moodle site is going to schools specific pages. Schools are also using some of the other content we've got there for sure, but this is 26% of traffic, and that is only 15% of our pages on the site. So it is really, really popular. So what have we learned from 4 years of providing this school's content? So I'm going to give you a couple of hints and tips that we've learned to help with those discussions. And also, I think I might be reiterating some of what Amy said, so forgive me if I'm preaching to the choir at this point. So my biggest point is to know your audience. I saw it came up in the chat in Amy's section, whether you actually aim the content at teachers or at the pupils themselves. And this is a discussion that we've had over and over again. And sometimes you even kind of need to take a step back and think, remember who you're aiming it at. So on ZOOdle, we've made the decision to aim the pages and the kind of style and the content at teachers. And the reason that we have made this decision is for data protection. So we don't want to collect data from anyone under 16 on ZOOdle. So we have made that decision. And it's also worth bearing in mind when you make this decision for yourselves, remember all of that data that Moodle captures in the background, as well as, what you're kind of deliberately asking for people. Remember that IP addresses can count as personal data under GDPR. So it's worth kind of taking those things into consideration. Having said that our ZOOdle is pitched at teachers, we do have some resources on there, again, that the pupils could do. But the kind of the structure of the site is set up that teachers would use it, they would go through it, and then we have some resources that they can use on their sort of their big whiteboards or on individual tablets with the kids having a go at them as well. As Amy mentioned, consider access to your site. So that, I think, was probably the biggest thing that I told her over and over and over again, was that we don't ask people to log in to ZOOdle almost at all. We're starting to do a couple of adult courses which are paid for, so people do need to log in to access those. But like 80-90% of the content on ZOOdle is available without logging in. So our site is default guest access, and you have to go in and set up the courses, put the sort of locks on, rather than the other way around. But under that considering access point as well, is make sure that the schools that you want to target, that you want to work with when you're setting up your own Moodles, make sure that they can actually access your site through their firewalls, because schools have some super strict protections in place sometimes. So it's worth kind of reaching out to your target audience and making sure that they can access it before you even start. And then also, if you're specifically targeting schools here, make sure that everything you do links to the curriculum. This was a tip from my fantastic colleague, Phil, who may be here or is joining us soon, who used to be a teacher. And basically, if your content doesn't link to the curriculum, the teachers are not going to use it. They are super busy. They have got so much to do and so many points to hit, that your stuff needs to meet what they want to do. And on that point of teachers being super busy as well, is my final point there is research. So obviously when you're setting up a Moodle site, make sure that you're doing your audience research, making sure that you're finding out what people want. But because teachers are so busy, you kind of need to sort of tailor the way that you kind of go to them to find this audience research, to find out what you need. So make sure that anything that you take to them is sort of super granular, that they can see examples of things that are ready to use, rather than that kind of sort of fuzzy, high quality, for sort of higher level kind of directional kind of things. There are other people that you can ask for those things. You can reach out obviously to SMUG, and if you're working in universities, you've got those sort of education colleagues there for that sort of higher level, and then test things that they'll actually use with the teachers would be my advice. And then tailoring your content to schools, which is kind of the point of today's session, I guess. So think about the different content types. I know Kenji's document's got some fantastic hints and tips already on the different sort of content types that work for schools. We use H5P a lot for schools because it is one of the ones that is available without requiring people to log in. So some of the Moodle things like quizzes and other sort of interactives that are built into Moodle will require them to log in, so we don't use those. So H5P we use a lot, but we also try and have a sort of a different kind of sort of spectrum of content types that we have. So on every single program, every single page that we create on Moodle, we try to make sure that we have at least one video, one online interactive, and something that will get people offline and doing something. So in our case, that's kind of out and about, outside in the zoo, out in nature, but that can be anything that sort of takes people away from the screen as well. In terms of taking people away from the screen, when you're talking about teachers and specifically, is to be careful of the amount of printing you're requiring people to do, because my lovely colleague Phil, who has just walked in, who is an ex-head teacher, he has given us the fantastic piece of advice that, did you say teachers sometimes only have one pack of paper a term?
Yeah, one pack of paper per term. So coming from a formal education background, we found that with regards to the budgets and the way that we had to think about resourcing, is that we had to be much more sustainable. So what you will find is a significant decrease in the volume of printed materials now in school. So if teachers can refer to a set resource and then use something like a visualizer to show it up on the screen, or interactive whiteboard presentations and tools that be converted. So something like a PowerPoint you can embed into an interactive whiteboard tool, then that is something that's really, really useful for most teachers these days.
Thanks, Phil. That was backwards and really uncomfortable, sorry. So the other couple of points that I've popped on tailoring your content, and Phil, just feel free to jump in if you have a point on anything I'm saying, is to use your unique selling points, you know. So you guys might be coming from a university or the botanics or the zoo in our case. There are hundreds of thousands of different online resources aimed at schools out there, and why would they bother using yours unless you've got that unique kind of element to it? So don't be afraid to shout about what you've got. You know, I've got monkeys on a slide about Moodle. Like, make it yours, is what I would say for tailoring your content. And also make sure that the tone of everything you're doing is pitched right. So obviously, like I said earlier, we aim ZOOdle at teachers specifically rather than the pupils themselves. But we kind of go for a general sort of reading age of 8 or 9 years old across everything we do, whether that's Moodle, the websites, the maps, everything in RZSS. We kind of go for that reading age for accessibility. So make sure that everything is at that kind of right place. And in terms of that as well, there are other places where you might want to think about the language that you're using for schools. So we're moving away. I know Moodle uses the word course a lot. We're trying to move away from using the word course because we found that it's a barrier for certain audiences, particularly the community audience that we're trying to reach now, but also to schools. So we're kind of going in favour of programme trialling that sort of thing instead. And so, yeah, kind of think about the language that you use. In terms of navigation, so I'll touch on that again. So that is, again, that's kind of part of the access, is like our open access, but also navigation in terms of don't make people find things. So if you are if you've got a page that's specifically targeted for teachers, send them a link to the page. Don't send them a link to ZOOdle. Send them a link to the specific page. And I've also found from research that ourselves and also the National Portrait Gallery have done on their schools. It's not actually using Moodle, but their schools page is fantastic if anyone wants to have a look at that. The recommendation we found is to not make people search, because search is unreliable. It takes a while in terms of also sustainability. It requires much more server stuff, so it's not as environmentally friendly. So as Amy kind of mentioned, we're moving now towards filters as well. So we are looking to allow teachers to filter by the specific curriculum area, as well as by animals, sustainable development goals, and the different kind of age ranges of things. And then the final thing about tailoring your content that I've popped on there is to keep in mind evaluation from the start, is what I always say. Think about what you're trying to make and then how you can measure whether it worked from the very beginning of any program that you ever make, whether that's Moodle or not. But you can do some really cool things with Moodle. So you can build evaluation in without people knowing that they're not filling out a feedback questionnaire. That you can have questions within a quiz or things like that you can kind of evaluate by stealth, I guess, is a fun way to say it. So now I think I'm going to give you a really quick sneak preview. So Kenji mentioned that ZOOdle is getting some upgrades. It's currently sort of halfway between the old site and the new at the moment. So forgive us while we're changing. But this, if I go back onto there we go. So on the left hand side with the koala, that is what ZOOdle used to look like, and then the 3 on the right hand side with the bright green is the direction that we're moving in. So this, to kind of give you an overview, we've updated our brand with the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland. So we're making Moodle fit with the new brand. So this should be now a seamless experience between our Moodle and our 3 main websites as well. So you'll feel like it's all just part of one user journey is the idea. We've got, as you can see there, if you can see in tiny little letters, find a random page. It's like under what will you discover? So that's a feature that I'm building at the moment, which is kind of like that Netflix, like watch a random show thing. So you'll click that and it will load something so that you can learn, which I think is going to be fun. But specifically for schools, we're revamping the course pages. So every course page will have curriculum notes at the top. We've made the decision to put it under a drop down, so it's always at the top. It's always really easy to find, but it's not taking up screen estate, because the feedback we've had is from home educators that curriculum links can be a bit off-putting. So we're making sure that it's always there, but that it's only there for people that actually are interested in it. And the final one on the far right that you can see, a lot of our educators are really enjoying using the grid view. So we've made a specific design for the grid view for ZOOdle going forwards. And even courses that might be locked down for whatever reason, for if they're paid courses or if they're done with a partner, every single page that we make will have a free option. So it will have like a taster or something on it as well. So that is a nice little sneak preview. I will check back in with Kenji probably April time. I set myself that goal of it being finished by April, and I can show you the site once it's had its full makeover. But really quickly, finally, these are the points which we're kind of looking at when we do that full makeover. So we have 260 pages on ZOOdle. We have 4,600 individual activities among those pages. So those are H5Ps, books, all of those kind of things. And every single one of those 4,500 activities are going to be checked, updated for content, and all of that split between our fabulous team. So it's going to be a huge team effort of upskilling in places where it's needed for using Moodle. And then everyone will be able to take ownership. And then these are the areas that we will be looking at. So we'll be looking at the audience, we'll be making sure that whatever we've got is appropriate for it. But also we're kind of trying to think of it from an audience point of view. So like in case of teachers, why are they coming on this program? Not why do we want to make this program, but what are teachers wanting to get out of it? And then can we measure whether they're getting out what they want as well as whether we're getting what we want? Obviously, the site needs to be usable. Are all of the links working? Is all the information up to date? And is all the information actually relevant to what that audience are looking for under usability? For accessibility, we follow the Sculpt principles. So we offer sort of alternative versions of interactives where required. And as I mentioned earlier, we always make sure that everything is in plain, easy to understand English. Branding is just there to make sure that everything, that is old, that might have a little bit of legacy styling written in its own CSS, updates to its new branding when the site changes over. And our content, we're going to get everybody to check everything. So it's every single one of those 4,500 activities is going to have a proofread. We're going to 1,000 times check copyright just to make sure it has every resource has those videos, interactives and offline interactives that we have, and actually just make sure, is it fun? Because that's what we want out of our Moodle. We want people to learn, but we want them to have fun as well. So that's one of the questions that people are going to have to ask of their resources. Does it have that built-in impact and evaluation that I mentioned? And also just briefly to see whether the pages are as environmentally sustainable as they can be, so that all the images have been compressed, that we've limited navigation and things like that. And there is a recording on Kenji's lovely SMUG channel of my previous environmental sustainability workshop for that, if you're interested in knowing a little bit more about how to make Moodle a bit more sustainable. So yeah, thank you for listening. I'm gonna try unplugging so Phil can hear you guys as well as you hear him. But if anyone has any questions, I think Kenji's putting in some time, or my email address is there. Like, always reach out. I love chatting to people.